We invite you to stand for the prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chambers for the betterment of our fellow citizens, lead us that we may do all things well. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Jaberke?
Present.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Here.
Mr.
Here.
Bob Culbertson?
Here.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Here.
And Mr. Schulmeyer.
Present.
Let the record show that 6 members are present, 1 member is absent. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to suspend with the regular order of business to hear a presentation this evening.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to, what did you say? Suspend
Suspend with the regular
to
order
the
of
regular
business.
order of business so we can hear a presentation.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Ms. Hausfeld to suspend with the regular order of business to hear the presentation this evening. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Mayor, I'll turn them over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, we have representatives from BASF. We have Tasso Rigopoulos, I hope I got that one right, who is the site director, and we have Mike Feldman, who is the site technical and engineering manager for BASF. And also we have another familiar face sitting back behind, Dan Ferguson from Alloy, who represents Hamilton County as the administrator for the Enterprise Zone Agreement Program. So this evening we'll turn this over to these gentlemen who will give us some information on this upcoming exciting project. So again, we'll turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present our company's profile and upcoming opportunities for growth to the St. Bernard Council. My name is Tasso Rigopoulos. I'm the site director of the BASF site here in Cincinnati. And as we introduced Mike Feldman, he's our project engineer manager for the site. I'm sure some of you are familiar with BASF, but for those that are not as familiar, I would like to take a couple of minutes for a high-level introduction. BASF is a German multinational chemical company and the largest chemical producer in the world. Its headquarters is located in Ludwigshafen, Germany. BASF has a large footprint of producing chemicals here in the U.S., about 150 different locations, over 16,000 employees, while globally we are over 350 locations and about 111,000 employees, servicing over 90,000 customers. Sorry, I was maybe at the wrong slide. That was the slide. My apologies for that. So going back to the right slide here. Here in North America, we share about 28% of global sales, which is an equivalent of almost $22 billion in 2021, out of the $78.5 billion from global sales. So we are, if you see North America there, we are second from all the other regions in sales. Also at BASF, we take a proactive approach to climate change and to net zero emissions by 2050. Our plans are to reduce 25% CO2 emissions by 2030 when we compare it to 2018 data. And we also aim to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. That will be done by offering our customers products made with renewable energy, operational efficiency, and further innovation in technology and digitalization. So now Mike will talk a little bit more about the history and the evolution of the site here in Cincinnati and St. Bernard, over 180 years of making chemistry here, and also some of the new growth opportunities for the site.
Okay, thank you. As introduced already, I'm Mike Feldman. I'm the engineering manager for BASF. And I thought it might be interesting for you to learn a little bit about the site history here. I've been working at the BASF St. Bernard plant for 40 years now, so I'm sort of designated as the site historian. Anyway, you can see in 1840 is when the business started. It was downtown Cincinnati. An English immigrant by the name of Thomas Emery was taking advantage of the fact that Cincinnati back then, if you remember, was nicknamed Porkopolis. It was a regional center for meatpacking, the largest center in the Midwest. So there was all this animal fat to do chemistry with. And so Thomas Emery was making lamp oil and candles out of the animal fat. A couple guys by the name of Procter & Gamble at the same time were doing similar chemistry. And Andrew Jergens also came along at the same time to make his soap factory. So you can see how important the oleochemicals, as this is called, is to the development of this area and industry here. In 1885, there was some flooding downtown, and so that riverfront plant then moved up here to its present location in St. Bernard. P&G, by the way, did the same thing the very next year. And the family grew to be very important industrialists and philanthropists in the history of this, this town. Along with developing the oleochemicals, we got a lot of innovations in oleochemicals, a lot of patents and so forth. And the business grew. However, by 1975, the descendants of Thomas Emery decided it was time to sell the business. And at that time, they sold to National Distillers and Chemical Corporation. It proceeded that way for a while until National Distillers decided they wanted to focus on the polyethylene market and the chemical side of their business, and they sold their liquor division to Jim Beam. And so without a liquor division, they couldn't call themselves National Distillers anymore, so they changed their name to Quantum Chemical, and that's how Quantum came to be. But Quantum was just short-lived because that was the first step for National Distillers to actually divest that oleochemicals part of the portfolio because it didn't match with the petroleum chemicals and derivatives like polyethylene. And so it was then sold to Henkel, which is the German consumer products giant. It's kind of a European equivalent of Procter & Gamble. And Henkel heavily invested in our plant and built the facility that we're talking about expanding now, our surfactants facility. And Henkel kept us for 10 years or so, and then they decided they wanted to focus on marketing rather than manufacturing. And so they spun us off as an entity called Cognis, which was then bought by private equity. And so we were held by this consortium of private equity firms for 10 years or so until BASF then bought us in 2010. And so that's how we got to where we are today. So our first experience with German ownership was with Henkel, and now we're back to German ownership with BASF. And so the operations at the Cincinnati site, we have three different plants. We're making esters and synthetic lubricants. We're making automotive coolants. We're also making surfactants. We also have a packaging line, an administration building on site. We have about 180 employees, which also includes some contractors that are full-time equivalents in our plant. Our products go to a diverse portfolio, many different customers, making home care and personal care products. You'd be familiar with all the names, soaps, shampoos, cleaners, things like that. So that's the line that we're talking about here tonight. Our plant has been certified under several different programs. We've got ISO 9001 quality certification. We got IATF, which is the International Automotive Task Force for our automotive coolants. FC that's the European Federation for Cosmetics Ingredients. So that just sort of gives you an idea of the certifications that we have to supply the customers that we do business with. We also have developed a safety culture that I'm very proud of. In our plant now, we have gone 6 years without an OSHA recordable injury, and we've gone 8 years without an OSHA lost time accident. So that's something that we're all very proud of. And this is a Google Earth view of our plant, just to kind of give you an idea of where we're talking about. So to get your bearings, the Mill Creek runs through here. This is the main body of our plant. The CSX main railroad here is here, and then P&G's Ivordale plant is this way. So SD Avenue runs here. And so this area of the plant is where we're making our surfactants, and you can see we have undeveloped land there. And that's where we're talking about putting our new project. The project will cover an area of about 10 acres, and you can see there the figures for the investments, the estimated investment cost, and the jobs that it will create. And I don't know if you want to go into any more details on that. So we're talking about creating 18 more jobs on top of the 34 that we already have for that plant. Payroll is going to grow by almost $1.5 million to almost $5 million for that area. And if our plans go through, we're going to start construction early next year. The important thing to understand is that within BASF, we are in competition with other sites globally for this very same business. There's a place in Thailand that wants to put in this same plant, and also in China. And so we feel that this place is the most advantageous for BASF business because the the largest customer bases here in North America. So we're trading lower manufacturing costs in Asia for improved logistics and delivery time here in North America. So that's the crux of our presentation to the BASF Investment Committee.
Yeah, and basically what we are trying to do here is anything that we can get from a help perspective, taxation, for example, it will definitely help to introduce this project as a very attractive investment for the village of St. Bernard, and we're trying very hard to bring this investment here for all of us. So that's why we're asking you to help us also and push this through. And we appreciate any kind of help you can provide on that. It's a great opportunity for the area. And something very important I think we have there during the construction time is going to be a flock of contractors, right, that will be in, they're going to need a lot of food, I think. And I'm pretty sure you guys can supply that on the local business level. So it's an exciting project for us, and we hope we're going to get it here as soon as possible. So, yep, appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else, Mayor? No? Okay, we appreciate your time and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will resume with the regular order of business then. Members of council, what is your pleasure on the reading of the minutes of the last council meeting?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the readings of the last council meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to dispense with the reading of the last minutes. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Members of council, are there any errors or corrections to the minutes? If not, the minutes will stand as submitted. Move to reports of city officials. Mayor, Mr. Stuchel.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we heard this evening from the representatives from BASF, who made the presentation to us, as previously discussed, we have been working with Alloy Development, who is the administrator for Hamilton County Enterprise Zone agreements, on a tax abatement in the amount of $45,848,000 on the improvements to the real property, basically new construction. It's being recommended that we approve a 10-year abatement for the exemption of 75%, and in accordance with the ORC, we would have a revenue sharing with the St. Bernard-Elmwood Place School District if payroll for the new jobs associated with the project meets or exceeds $1 million. I believe this is a win-win for both the village and the school district to be able to support this investment that is being proposed by one of our local industrial partners, and I am asking for your support on resolution number 8. I am also asking for your support on ordinance number 34 so that the village can enter into an agreement with Allied Development, formerly HCDC, to represent the village on economic development issues. They would focus on new opportunities and also retention of our local businesses and industrial partners. Also, on Saturday, November 19th, this coming Saturday at 3 p.m., there will be a community engagement event for the proposed changes to the village charter. Mark Wendling, the consultant who is retained to do the form of government review, along with several village and city managers and administrators, will be making a presentation. There will be a second event on Wednesday, December 7th at 7 p.m. Both events will be here in council chambers. After both events have been held, there will be a survey that will follow. There is also a PowerPoint of the presentation that will be made on the village website, along with links to the ICRC broadcast. I'm also currently working with the police union on their contract that will expire in January, so I'm hoping to be able to discuss the current collective bargaining process at the next committee of the whole. I'm also working with the school on the agreement or an MOU for an SRO, and I'll hopefully have an update for you by the next COW as well. I am also asking that we give consideration to try to bring back regular block watch meetings rather than trying to have on-demand town hall safety committee meetings when issues come up on social media. I think that if we could go back to actually have a more regular occurrence of scheduled meetings where we can give proper updates on a regular basis. So I don't know who I need to speak with on scheduling that, but I think I'd like to go back to trying to hold more regular meetings than what's been done, just to try to meet some of the demand in the community.
Is that it then, Mayor? Okay.
Mr. President, may I respond to that?
Mr. Berkey.
I've been checking with the chief. Chief keeps putting me off. We're starting block watch up in the beginning of next year once he gets all the new men started. He didn't have time to do both, he said. So,
Mr. President.
Mayor.
So we'll make time. So if we'll have that whenever you can get it scheduled. So if we can, we'll have the first one. If you want to wait till the first year, or whether we can do one in December, I mean, we can still make it happen. So you tell me what works for you, but if we can try to do that, just at least try to get an update. I already spoke with Lieutenant Ungru, and we can certainly try to get someone that could at least maybe hold the first meeting, try to answer some questions, but I don't see any reason, why we can't start. I guess I understand we're in the middle of the hiring process and trying to get staffed, but trying to get somebody that could be a regular facilitator, it will take a little bit of time, but we certainly can get somebody there that could help answer some of the questions. And I think one of the lieutenants would be able to do that. So if it is a desire to do it before the first of the year, we can make it happen.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tabergi.
third Thursday, December 15th. We'll have December 15th down at the safety center. I believe 6:30 is the starting time.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. I would assume that we'll have a call command announcing. All right, Director of Law, Ms. Van Valkenburg.
Thank you. You have before you ordinance number 35, which we've prepared following the COW discussion last week, raising the expenditure which can be made without requiring council approval to $50,000 was placed on the table. I'd like to have you vote on that tonight and approve that. Also, I do need to go into executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss pending litigation. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Treasurer, Safety and Service Director, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my community, are you one of those many who like to seek things, spotting a shiny on the ground, or perhaps delighting in an Easter egg hunt? Better yet, a scavenger hunt, solving a puzzle while seeking what the signs mean. Earthly treasures, in my beliefs, are also fun. I looked at that 100 times and never noticed it. Now that winter's gloom is upon us, you may not feel as enthusiastic about what you enjoy. Others can feel this way also. Turn inward to find your valued treasures. Sense what you miss. Your treasure may be lonely, wrapped in a blanket, unaware that you are the treasure they long to hear. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Tax Administrator, Ms. Helms.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a recap on October's receipts. Tax collection for October was $977,728. October 2022 is up 4.8% from October 2021. Tax refunds for October were $33,840. Delinquent tax collected with capital recovery was $823. Delinquent tax collected with the Ohio Attorney General's office was $4,290. Taxes paid through the e-file portal were $1,632. That concludes my report.
Thank you. We'll move to reports of standing committees. Finance, Mr. Tabergi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I urge passage of Resolution 8, 2022 for tax abatement tonight.
Thank you. Safety, Service, Ms. Hausfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, I have the Service Department report for October 2022. There were 31 trucks placed at residents, 21 dumpsters placed at residents, 107 special pickups at residents, 150.64 tons of garbage taken to the landfill. The recycling program report is 20.85 tons of recycling material, 3,360 pounds of scrap metal, and 30-yard roll-offs. Also, there was a waste collection fee for the month of September, $25,672.13 was remitted to the village. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Improvements, Mr. Bob Culberson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to let the residents know, the CIC meeting scheduled for this Tuesday has been canceled, so we're going to push that back to December. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Laws, Contracts, and Claims, Ms. Bettinghouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a question for Valerie. Valerie, we talked last week in committee of whole about having a laws, contracts, and claims meeting for short-term rental. Did you want that in December, or did you want to push that back to January?
Realistically, getting it to first part of January would be better. I'd like to get it to you next month to look
Okay.
at.
Okay.
So you're familiar with it before we actually meet.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Marketing, Mr. Ray Colbertson.
Thanks, Mr. President. A St. Bernard's Christmas celebration will be held on Saturday, December 3rd, between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Stop at City Hall to watch the tree lighting ceremony at 6 p.m. You can then stop by to visit Santa and Miss Claus and get your photo taken. Bring your own camera. You can ride the trolleys and participate in the pack light contest. There will also be a petting zoo, Christmas carolers, and a Queen City High Railers train display. Please be on the lookout earlier in the day from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as Santa and Miss Claus will be traveling around the village. Lastly, Light Up St. Bernard will also be held on that same night. Residents are invited to pick up their free luminary kits at the Recreation Department on the following dates: Sunday, November 20th from 2 to 6 p.m., Sunday, November 27th from 2 to 6 p.m., and Thursday, December 1st from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mayor
I
Stuchel.
hate to interrupt, but if
Yeah.
I could actually add to Mr. Culberson's report, I'm actually asking for volunteers. So we actually would like to see if we could ask potentially to see if any council members would be available on Saturday evening from 6 to 9, whether you could take an hour or a shift to help with hot chocolate, coffee, and the distribution of cookies. We're just looking for a couple people that could help, whether, again, if it's broken up, the rec department cannot cover everything, and, you know, the typical volunteers are not as available as what it maybe used to be. So I'm going to put out an email and ask if maybe you all could maybe make a commitment for a little bit of time to help. And again, this would be an indoor distribution. We are moving a lot of activities outside with the fresh market and whatnot, but it would be easier for the hot chocolate, because last year we had a table full of, you know, toppings and whipped cream and other things so the kids could do whatever they wanted. It's a whole lot easier doing that inside than it would be out. So again, you would be safe from the elements, if that's any encouraging. And we will also try to have some of the games on that night, so if anyone is willing. So I will be putting out an email. So thank you.
Thank you. Business and Industry, Mr. Schultmeyer.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Clerk, are there any communications this evening?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no communications.
Thank you. At this time, if you could give the first reading of Resolution Number 8, 2022.
Resolution number 8, 2022, a resolution consenting to the execution of an agreement between the Board of County Commissioners of Hamilton County, Ohio, and BASF Cognis, providing for the adoption of a project which will expand a business in the village of St. Bernard and create employment opportunities within the enterprise zone of Hamilton County, and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of Resolution Number 8, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of Resolution Number 8, 2022.
Second, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Mr. DeBerke, to suspend with the second and third reading of Resolution Number 8, 2022. Are there any remarks? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to suspend?
Mr. Twergy?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schultmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt Resolution Number 8, 2022.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, second by Mr. Ray Culbertson, to adopt Resolution Number 8, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Twerky?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schultmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Resolution Number 8, 2022 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of Ordinance Number 33, 2022?
Ordinance number 33, 2022, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as part of the various component codes of the codified ordinances of St. Bernard, Ohio, revising the traffic and general offenses codes to comply with state law and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 33, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 33, 2022.
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 33, 2022. Are there any remarks? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 33? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to adopt ordinance number 33, 2022.
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to adopt ordinance number 33, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson? Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Ordinance number 33, 2022 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 34, 2022?
Ordinance number 34, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Alloy Development Company, Inc. to provide certain professional economic development services and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 34, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 34, 2022.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance 34, 2022. Are there any remarks?
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke?
to me, this is long overdue since Paul Meyer left 4 years ago or whatever. We haven't had somebody down there full time. I think this is a good thing to get a company here to work on this.
Thank you. Are there any other remarks?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I would like to agree with Don. I think this is very well needed, and I think it's a great thing for St. Bernard.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 34, 2022? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to adopt ordinance number 34, 2022.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to adopt ordinance 34, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Ordinance number 34, 2022 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 35, 2022?
Ordinance number 35, 2022, ordinance amending the Village of St. Bernard Codified Ordinance, Section 121.08 regarding the expenditure limit requiring council approval and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 35, 2022. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 35, 2022.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance 35, 2022. Are there any remarks? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 35, 2022? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson? Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 35, 2022.
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to adopt ordinance 35, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Ordinance number 35, 2022 is adopted as read. At this time, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session at the end of this meeting for pending litigation.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberkey.
make a motion to go in executive session in the meeting for pending litigation.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. Taberkey, seconded by Mr. Bob Culbertson to go into executive session at the end of this meeting to discuss pending litigation. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld? Aye. Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays. Council will go into executive session at the end of this meeting to discuss pending litigation. At this time, does anyone on council have anything under old business? Does anyone on council have anything under new business? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council this evening? Please state your name and address for the record.
Anthony Durbin, 36 Baker Avenue. I'd just like to address council directly as a whole. I don't know how to word this. Sorry. I don't understand how some of you, it seems like every meeting always has no report for how much you get paid to be here for an hour of your time. But there's a lot that goes on in this village for some of you to never have a report. For like some of you have more no reports than you've had reports since you've been elected. And that is very sad with how much you get paid to be here to represent the village of St. Bernard. There's a lot of things that go on in this village that should be brought up here but never do. I also feel sad to say that I don't even trust our police department because I've had officers directly at the lights watch me almost get hit by a car, speeding and running a red light, and the same person is actually a supervisor for the department who is here training these new guys blatantly ignore the law. And then we don't have these block watch meetings, these safety meetings. Now I hear that we want to bring the block watch meetings back. That's nice, but I don't feel like it's going to change considering supervisors are training these guys to not do anything. I would love to know, unfortunately I didn't know Brickwig wasn't going to be here because I would love to know how many tickets were written last month and how many traffic stops as a whole were done last month because I feel like there's none. And the excuse is that they're always busy. They're down at Dollar General, Dollar Tree. They're handling disputes with families. I feel like that's a load of crap with how many times I've talked to people and they drive past our police station and we'll see all the cars sitting there. I feel like they're just sitting on their butts doing absolutely nothing when they could be sitting on the side of the roads, pulling people over and enforcing the traffic laws of this village, keeping our families and our kids safe. I sit at school zones quite often and I watch cars go speeding right past a police officer running a red light, nearly hitting the crossing guard and the kids. It's a constant problem. It's just going to take somebody getting hurt before it changes, because that's what's coming.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taberkey.
not if you checked the last council meeting, Kurt did give a report from the police department then.
All right. All right. What is council's pleasure on the absent member?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion that we allow the absent member of the council. Excuse, allow.
I'll second
Excuse,
that.
yeah.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to excuse the absent member. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. The next committee of the whole will be Thursday, December 8th, 7 p.m. here in council chambers. And don't forget the charter change meeting this Saturday, also here in council chambers at 3 p.m. At this time, council will go into executive session to discuss pending litigation, and we will be back when we are.